If you have ever wondered how to cut chicken feed costs with a self-regrowing food forest, this is exactly what I've been trying to build. Not with a big budget, not with perfect soil, and not with some polished magazine version of a homestead. I started with a bare strip of compacted dirt, a little leftover fencing, a few hardy plants, and the stubborn hope that maybe this space could grow more of my flock's food instead of asking me to keep hauling home bag after bag from the feed store. But I learned something quickly. A patch can look green and promising one week and almost bare the next once chickens get access to it. So this is not just a success story, it is also a failure story. And honestly, I think that makes it more useful. Because what I discovered after a full season of testing is that cutting feed costs is not really about finding one miracle crop. It is about building a system where deep roots hold on, where tall plants grow above scratching feet, where some food drops low, some grows high, and some keeps coming back even after the birds have done their best to tear it up. And that is what I want to show you today. How this tunnel went from bare toward buffet, what failed, what changed, and what I'm planting now so this food forest can keep feeding my flock for years instead of weeks. Last year, I built a simple chicken tunnel along the edge of the garden. The idea was modest, just guide the chickens through a narrow path where they could scratch for bugs, clean up weeds, and patrol the garden edges without wrecking the beds themselves. That worked well enough to get my attention. It made me realize that when you guide chickens carefully, even a small strip of land can start doing real work. But this year, I wanted more than bug control. I wanted production. I wanted a place that could grow greens, seeds, shade, and a little resilience right where the birds already spend time. Not enough to throw away the feeder and pretend chickens can live on forage alone. That is not realistic. Pasture and forage can meaningfully supplement a flock, but they usually provide only part of the diet, and clean hens still need balanced feed, clean water, and reliable calcium sources to stay productive and healthy. Even so, small reductions matter, especially when feed is often the biggest cost of keeping chickens. And that matters more than ever. Feed prices never seem to drift gently downward. Summers can turn dry in a hurry. Weather swings harder than it used to. And families who keep chickens long enough eventually realize that every small piece of independence matters. A little less dependence on the store, a little more food grown at home, a little more stability built quietly, season by season. That is really what I care about here on Family Yard Kitchen. Not grand promises, not fantasy self-sufficiency, just simple systems that help the yard, the flock, the garden, and the kitchen support one another. So I picked the ugliest strip I had. Compacted dirt, weeds, hard ground, a place most people would walk past and never think twice about. And I decided to see if that bare patch could become a self-regrowing food forest for my chickens. At the beginning, I did what a lot of us do. I reached for the quickest green fix. I planted annuals, fast ones, soft ones, helpful ones. Things like crimson clover that could cover the soil, feed the ground, and hopefully feed the birds at the same time. On paper, it sounded wonderful. Green cover over a dead patch, better soil underneath, a fresh patch of living forage for the flock. And for a little while, it really did look like it was working. The ground softened, the green came in, the whole strip looked more alive. You know that feeling when a rough space suddenly begins to look hopeful? When the color comes back and you start imagining what it could be by midsummer? That's where I was. But chickens do not care about your hopeful mood. Once I let them into that strip full time, they went through it with the kind of determination only chickens seem to possess. Pecking, scratching, raking backward with those hard little feet, tearing through tender growth faster than I expected. What had looked like a promising forage patch became a lesson in exposed stems and bare soil. And that was disappointing, but it was also clarifying, because the problem wasn't that clover is useless. The problem was that I was asking a soft annual planting to stand up to constant pressure from birds that never stopped working the ground. If chickens live in a space full time, they can eat and scratch faster than many low-growing plants can recover. The strip had improved the soil, yes, but it hadn't become self-regrowing food. Not yet. That failure taught me the most important lesson in this whole project. A chicken food forest cannot be built around weak plants alone. It needs plants that can do one of two things. Either they grow back faster than chickens can damage them, or they grow tall and tough enough to keep producing above chicken height. That changed the whole plan. And honestly, if you appreciate seeing the parts that fail as well as the parts that work, you're in the right place. Because this kind of backyard resilience isn't built by pretending every first attempt is brilliant. It's built by paying attention. Even though the first planting got hammered, it still left me with something valuable. The soil looked better. That mattered. Compared to the compacted strip I started with, this patch had more life in it, more softness, more structure, more evidence that roots had already begun repairing what used to be tired ground. So I didn't walk away feeling like the season was wasted. I walked away realizing I had been one layer too shallow. Annual cover crops are useful, but on their own, they are not enough for a tunnel like this. What I really needed was a stacked system. Deep-rooted perennials down low, holding their place and mining nutrients from below. Tall grains and seed crops rising up where the chickens can't instantly wipe them out. Fruiting shrubs and volunteer trees adding a middle and upper layer. And management in between. Rest periods, timing, access only after plants are strong enough to handle it. That's when this stopped feeling like a patch and started feeling like a food forest. Not a forest in the grand, dramatic sense. A backyard forest edge, a small space version, a practical version. The kind built in layers. And once I saw that, the next step was obvious. I had to block the chickens out for a while. That wasn't my favorite part, because when you keep birds, you always want them in the action. You want them helping. But some systems only work if you give the roots a head start. So instead of letting the chickens rush in and repeat the same destruction, I started thinking in terms of establishment first, access later. That one change may be the difference between a tunnel that stays bare and one that slowly learns how to feed itself. One of the first plants I came back to was amaranth. I like amaranth because it thinks vertically. It's not a plant that wants to hug the ground and hope for mercy. It wants to rise. Thick stem, bold seed head, a shape that makes sense in a chicken tunnel because once it gets up through the fencing, it can begin producing overhead instead of right at beak level. It's also a warm season crop, not frost tolerant, so it needs to go in after danger of frost has passed and the soil has warmed. And nutritionally, it's more like a homegrown grain supplement than a complete ration by itself, which is exactly how I want to think about it here. That's part of the mindset shift. I'm not expecting one amaranth patch to do the job of a balanced feeder. I'm expecting it to become a homegrown source of seeds and leafy growth that drops value into the tunnel over time. A little overhead grain, a few leaves for the birds, and maybe some volunteer reseeding if enough seed shatters in the right place. Not guaranteed, but possible. And there's something satisfying about that. A plant standing there in late summer, heavy-headed, slowly leaning over the tunnel. Chickens walking underneath, stems loosening and falling a little at a time. That's the kind of quiet productivity I want more of. I also want sorghum in the mix for a similar reason. Tall, drought-tolerant, good in heat. A plant that can throw a little shade while still building grain overhead. In a hot season, that matters. Chickens benefit from food, yes, but they also benefit from a cooler little climate under living plants instead of open, baking ground. And then there are peas. Peas are not the towering backbone of this system, but they are useful in the gaps, an early season cool weather helper. Something to get green growth moving sooner while the warm season plants are still waiting on heat. A vine here, a pod there, something the chickens will happily strip later. And this is where timing becomes everything, because none of these crops work the way I want if I let the chickens in too early. The birds have to wait until stems are strong, roots are set, and the growth is high enough to survive first contact. That's one of the most useful lessons in this whole tunnel. You don't always need more land. Sometimes you need better timing. Jerusalem artichokes are another plant that changed shape in my mind once I looked at them through the lens of a chicken tunnel. In a neat raised bed, they can feel like trouble. They spread. They pop up where you did not ask them to. They're the kind of plant that makes tidy gardeners sigh. But inside a rough, productive tunnel, that same aggressive energy starts looking useful. They grow tall. They build a lot of biomass. They come back from below, and they're rooted deeply enough that chickens are unlikely to clear them out completely. One of my favorite moments in this whole process was digging tubers in winter. Snow on top, dead stalks above, cold air in your face, and under that quiet surface, food still waiting. There is something good about that lesson. The ground can look empty and still be holding abundance underneath. I remember brushing back snow, turning the soil and spotting those little tubers one by one. Some tiny, some more promising. The kind of moment where a child points and says, "There's one right there," and suddenly everyone is crouched over the same patch of earth like treasure hunters. That kind of scene matters to me, because this project is not only about savings, it is also about memory, about children seeing that food can be hidden in the soil, about learning that what looks dead in winter may only be sleeping. In the tunnel, Jerusalem artichokes give me several things at once: tall summer stalks, leaves and tops the birds can nibble, flowers up high, roots that help the plant return, and tubers that can serve as backup food for the household or treats in moderation for livestock. They're famously hardy and adaptable, which is one reason they suit rough edges so well. I do keep one gentle caution in mind with them. For people, Jerusalem artichokes are one of those foods that are better in modest amounts than in giant, enthusiastic servings. They're wonderful, but they can also be memorable for the wrong digestive reasons if you overdo them. So I like thinking of them as a useful reserve crop, not the daily mountain of food. And that's really the spirit of this whole system. Not excess, not waste, just useful abundance in the right place. If there is one plant that made me stop and think, why didn't I do this sooner? It is comfrey. Comfrey is one of those plants that teaches you to trust what is happening underground. Above ground, it's generous. Big leaves, fast regrowth, pollinator flowers when it blooms. But the real story is below the surface. That deep root system is what makes it so valuable in a chicken space. The birds can tear at the top, but they are very unlikely to remove the whole plant once it's established. And that's exactly what I need here. Not fragile greenery that disappears in one burst of scratching. A plant that answers pressure by coming back. Digging comfrey in cold weather has its own kind of satisfaction. The tops may look half asleep, but down in the soil, the roots are very much alive. When you lift one plant and see those roots branching, thick and earthy, it feels less like harvesting and more like multiplication. One plant can become several. A small piece can become another start. Suddenly, what looked like a single perennial becomes the beginning of a whole row. That is one of the best feelings in gardening. Not buying more, making more. Now, with comfrey, I do think moderation matters. It's nutrient-dense, and that's part of what makes it attractive, but comfrey also contains pyrrolizidine alkaloids, so I am not treating it like the only thing a bird should ever eat. I treat it as one plant in a broader salad bar, a supplement inside a broader system, not the whole ration. Research on limited inclusion in poultry feed is encouraging, but the broader caution around these alkaloids is real enough that I prefer a calm, moderate approach. That approach fits the whole philosophy here anyway. Diversity is safer. Diversity is more resilient. Diversity gives the flock choices. So I am planting comfrey and Jerusalem artichokes close enough to build real fodder density, but with enough room that each plant can develop strength, roughly a foot apart. Close, but not crowded. The hope is that by the time spring growth really gets moving, those roots will already be in place and ready to push upward. And once that happens, this tunnel starts changing character. It stops feeling like an annual experiment. It starts feeling perennial. This is also the point where this project feels more hopeful to me, because perennial systems have a way of rewarding patience. The first year asks a lot, the next year remembers, and the year after that begins to give back. If you enjoy watching a backyard system mature slowly instead of instantly, that's the kind of story this is. Beyond the backbone plants, I already have a few gifts in this space. Mulberries are here. Black raspberries are here. A few volunteers have already made their own case for belonging. And I love that, because some of the best food forest plants are the ones that show up and prove they want the job. Mulberries especially make so much sense around chickens. They drop fruit generously, they cast a little shade, they soften summer heat, And when fruit starts falling, the birds clean up what we miss. Research on mulberry and poultry diets is promising as well, but in the tunnel, what I value most is how naturally it fits the garden, coop, kitchen loop. I also think people underestimate what shade is worth in a system like this. Food matters, but so does comfort. A bird foraging under filtered light, on mulch, near living roots, is in a different environment than a bird standing on hot exposed dirt with nowhere to cool off. Trees and taller plants help feed the flock directly, but they also make the whole tunnel feel more livable. And when the birds live better, the whole system tends to work better. Over time, my plan is simple. Block the chickens out while the strongest plants establish. Let the roots take hold. Let the stems rise. Then rotate the birds back in once the growth is ready. Not endless access, timed access. That may be one of the biggest differences between a patch that survives and one that disappears. And I want to be honest here about what I mean by cutting feed costs. I'm not telling you this tunnel is going to replace every bag of feed. That's not the promise. In a good season, a system like this may trim a meaningful portion of what the flock would otherwise eat from the feeder, and even a small reduction adds up over time. Forage is a supplement, not a magic substitute, but that still matters. A scoop here, a scoop there, a little less waste, a little more nutrition grown on site, a flock with more to do, a patch of ground improving instead of declining. That's a real gain. And for families like ours, real gains are enough. If this kind of slow, practical chicken setup is what you're building too, Backyard Chicken Basics is a gentle next step. It's there for people who want a simpler foundation for caring for the flock and building these backyard loops well. So when I look at this tunnel now, I don't just see what failed, I see what the failure revealed. I see that soft annuals alone were never going to carry the system. I see that roots matter more than appearances. I see that timing matters almost as much as plant choice. And I see that a bare strip of hard ground can become much more generous if you build it in layers and give it time. That's the real lesson here. Small routines build resilience. A row of comfrey, a stand of amaranth, a few Jerusalem artichokes under the soil, mulberries dropping fruit in season, chickens coming in only when the plants are ready. None of that looks dramatic on its own, but together it becomes a pattern. And good patterns are what carry families through expensive seasons, dry spells, and uncertain years. Not fear, not hype, just steady systems that keep giving a little more back than they did before. So that's where this project stands right now. From bare toward buffet, from one failed cover crop toward a real perennial rhythm, from buying everything at the store toward growing a little more of what the flock needs at home. I'll keep updating this as the seasons move, because the truth is a food forest is never really finished. It matures, it teaches, it surprises you, and sometimes it humbles you first. If you want to see how much this tunnel really saves over time and how this backyard keeps changing season by season, subscribe and stay close. There's a lot more to build here. Thanks for spending this time with me, and I'll see you in the next one.